Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Felicia Donald Coleman. I am a DNP student at the University of Michigan Flint. Today I will be doing my presentation on nurturing cultural competence in nursing. This presentation was derived from the original work of Dr. Margaret Andrews, Dr. Marilyn McFarland, and Dr. Hiba Ribi Alama. Today, upon completing this presentation, I hope that you all will be able to complete a self-assessment as it relates to cultural care, understand concepts related to culture, recognize and apply the basic principles of Leininger's transcultural nursing theory, use generic and professional knowledge to help develop nursing goals and actions, describe ways to overcome the cultural barriers to nursing care, and finally describe nursing strategies that promote the delivery of culturally congruent care. Madeline M. Leininger is known as the founder of transcultural nursing, which was evolved into a nursing discipline. She was born July 13, 1925 in Nebraska. She earned several degrees, including a Doctor of Philosophy, a Doctor of Human Sciences, a Doctor of Science, and is a registered nurse. She is a certified transcultural nurse, a fellow of Royal College of Nursing in Australia, and a fellow of the American Academy of Nursing. She accomplished many great works over the years. She developed transcultural nursing and cultural care theory because she felt that when one was providing care to patients, it was equally important to know about the patient's culture and his or her cultural background when one made decisions regarding how to provide care for that patient. The major event that led to the development of her theory happened in the 1950s when she worked with children in a clinical specialist caring for mildly disturbed children of diverse cultural backgrounds. That means they were from all different cultures. During her exposure, it became evident to her that nurses and other health professionals fail to appreciate the important role of culture in healing, caring processes, and in mental treatment practices. Essentially, transcultural nursing has focused on understanding cultures and their specific care needs and how to provide care that fits their life ways, which are things, the way that they live, the different things that they do based on their culture, rather than assuming professional nurses always know what is best for the patient. The purpose of transcultural nursing care is to discover and establish a body of knowledge and skills focused on transcultural care, health or well-being, and illness in order to assist nurses giving culturally competent, safe, and congruent care to people of diverse cultures in the world. There are three phases to transcultural nursing. The first is becoming aware of self, becoming aware of and sensitive to cultural care differences. That's called cultural awareness. Anyways, I provided you all with handouts that you all can look at that gives you different tools that you can do a self-evaluation about, so you can learn about yourself and become aware of what your culture is, you know, any biases, stereotypes, or anything that you may have. The second phase is the use of theories to discover and explain transcultural nursing phenomena with vague knowledge, uses to guide research and explain. So those are different things. Like I also provided you all with some tools for that as well. And phase 3 is the use of transcultural research findings to improve people care. Use of knowledge in practice for congruent care. So basically, those three phases in a nutshell is knowing who you are, knowing what your biases are, then going on to the next phase where you, guided by research. There's been tons and tons of research done on different cultures, looking at those things, trying to incorporate that stuff into your practice. After Madeline Leininger developed transcultural nursing and started focusing in on cultural competence, other people also developed some. So this is just one of many. You can also do some research on that as well. This one is the Papadopoulos, Tilke, and Taylor, or PTT model for developing cultural competence. And this phase, there's actually 4 phases to this one. The first one is cultural awareness, which we just spoke about briefly, which is self-awareness, knowing yourself, ethnocentricity. You're not in, your ethnic background is not better than other people. You know, cultural identity. Culturally, who are you? Ethno-history, what is the history? Stereotyping, all men do this, or all black people do this. That's stereotyping. Then cultural knowledge, health beliefs. What do they believe about health? What behaviors? A lot of this research that even Papadopoulos, Tilke, and Taylor did, as well as Leininger, came from an anthropological background. Understanding similarities and differences within the cultures, and any health inequalities where some cultures get more care or get different treatment than other cultures. Then you go from there to cultural sensitivity, where now you're sympathizing with those people. You can build up a type of trust with them. Your interpersonal and communication skills are based around culture, you know, the culture. Being accepting of other people's cultures. Respect, and then barriers to cultural sensitivity. And finally, the last phase is cultural competence, where now you're at the stage where you have the assessment skills, the diagnostic skills, clinical skills, and changing, addressing prejudice and discrimination and inequalities within other cultures. Papadopoulos' definition of culture is a little bit different than Leininger, and if you look at all the different theorists, you will see that there are many different definitions. This is the one that they gave. All human beings are cultural beings. Culture is the shared way of life of a group of people that includes beliefs, values, ideas, language, communication, norms, and visibility, expressed forms such as customs, art, music, clothing, food, and etiquette. Culture influences individuals' lifestyles, personal identity, and their relationships with others, both within and outside their culture. Cultures are dynamic and ever-changing, as individuals are influenced by and influence their culture by different degrees. In other words, it's just saying culture, everybody has a culture. There are many different cultures in the world. And do we really know who we are? Like, what are our beliefs, our values, our ideas? That's our culture. What is our religion, our communication? How do we communicate with people? What special type of clothing does the African American wear as opposed to the Indian or the Philippine? What type of dancing, food? Those are all things that's a part of culture. Religions. A few useful definitions from Papadopoulos was ethnocentricity, the tendency to use one's own group standards as the standard when viewing other groups, to place one's group at the top of the hierarchy and to rank others lower. That was by Sumner. Racism, a doctrine or ideology of dogma. It recognized by the behavior of individuals and institutions based on concepts of racial difference. Stereotypes, to categorize ideas, people, or objects based on a typecast or standardized prototype, lacking any room to account for individuality. And finally, valuing diversity is where we want to get. That means being responsive to a wide range of people unlike oneself, according to any number of distinctions: race, gender, class, native, language, national origin, physical ability, age, sexual orientation, professional experience, personal preferences, and work style. And as you can see, culture is more than just how we look, how we dress, what we believe. It also includes our ages. That's a part of our culture because people in different ages do things differently. Sexual orientation, homosexuals, bisexuals, transsexuals, heterosexuals. All of those are different cultures. They do things differently in each one of those arenas. Leininger's cultural assessment. You have a copy of each of these. The first one is the suggested inquiry guide. This is to be used with the enabler. If you turn the page to the last page, that's the Sunrise enabler. That first page, the first couple of pages, and the last page go together. You kind of use those together. And then in the middle, you see the Leininger's Acculturation Healthcare Assessment Guide for Cultural Patterns, Traditional and Non-Traditional Lifeways. So those are some of the tools that you can use. And as I said earlier, there are many, many other ones out there. Now, some of the components of culturological assessments are communication and language. And this is one of the things that we deal with a lot at work, because we get people from the federal agency and immigration, and a lot of those people are immigrants. And some of them are like first generation immigrants who just migrated over here and they don't speak English. Now, when they're at home, in their home setting, those people have other family members who can communicate when they need them to for English. But sometimes in the healthcare setting, they may be there alone, or like I work in corrections. In corrections, we can't use other patients to speak their language because they could be a breach of their confidentiality. So we have to use interpreters and things of that nature. We talked about gender considerations, sexual orientation, abilities and disabilities. Those are considered culture. Arthritis, diabetes, those are different groups of people. Occupation, age, and all the rest of the things that are listed here. When you begin a cultural assessment, you want to begin doing the initial contact when you first meet with the patient. So if you're working in a hospital setting or a nursing home or a house where you're doing AFC patients and they have medical conditions and they come from different cultures, as soon as you have your initial contact with those people, that's when you want to start doing your cultural assessment. Because in order for you to develop a plan for that patient, you have to know about their culture, because in order for you to have an effective plan, you actually want to make sure that you incorporate that culture into that plan. So at the initial contact, during your admission process, that's a good time to start that. You want to include the patient in the process. Here we're talking about generic and professional knowledge. Generic knowledge is like folk medicine, where different cultures do different things. You have some that do yoga. You have some cultures that do medicine, different medicinal practices with witch doctors and things of that nature. That would be the generic type. The things that your grandmother or your mother taught you, those home remedies, that's generic knowledge. Professional knowledge is the knowledge that we as healthcare professionals have, where we go and we get specialized training and education and degrees for this. Then another area is when there are language barriers. We just talked about this. Make sure you maintain the confidentiality by using an interpreter. But make sure the interpreter is not, it can either be a family member or you can call companies that have interpreters available for you. But you can't use another patient, because then you really don't know if the trust, like in my setting, I work in corrections, you don't know whether you can trust what the other patient is saying because they're both in a jail setting. And then make use of the tools such as Leininger's Sunrise model and the inquiry guide and the other things that I have provided you with. Additionally, with the assessments, don't forget to assess yourself and reevaluate yourself. This is the Sunrise model enabler that you have a copy of, and it's like a picture of the sun, and it's basically telling you that in order to provide culturally congruent care, which is care that incorporates the generic and the professional together, that's the only way that you can really address the person's well-being and dying. And all these different areas influence the other. The worldview. How does the world think about that person or that culture? Cultural and social structural dimensions such as kinship, family. Filipinos, family is very important to them. You know, some people may not want that. Cultural values, beliefs, ways of life, all those things are influenced by the worldviews. And then down here, the care experiences and practices, all these things, as you can see the little arrows going back and forth, they all intertwine and they all affect each other. Now, we just saw the sun, go back one. Oh no, that's right. We just saw the sunrise enabler, and you all have a copy of that. These next few slides are talking about the sunrise enabler. We talked about that. Religion, technology is one of the things that's on there. How does the technology affect? Now, I did an interview with the Filipino, and he said that they're glad for technology because he's here in the United States, and his family is still in the Philippines. So technology is good for them because it allows them to communicate better with one another. This is politics, political, and legal issues. That's a part of that sunrise enabler. Next. Here we have religion. Religion is a very strong thing. This is the Quran. That's the Bible, and that's the Torah. This is Muslims, this is Christian, and that is the Jewish. And they all have different traditions and different beliefs about health and how health is done. The Muslims have certain foods that they won't eat. They do certain fasts. Certain times a day, you have to look at that when you're developing your care, as in passing medication. If you have to pass medication on a Muslim, you have to make sure it's not during the time when they're fasting or during their prayer time, because they pray several set times during the day. Language. That's all the different languages, different ways of saying thank you, gracias, mahalo, mercy, in different languages. Just as different as those languages are, is sometimes how different we are culturally. However, even though we're different culturally, there are also some similarities as well. Culture and social structural dimensions. This is the kinship part. These are different families from different cultures. And you can look at all these different families, but everything is not the same about them. Even the way that, like in certain families, like in the Philippine family, the male is considered dominant. It's like that in a lot of families, but in some families it's different. It may be the grandmother, or it may be so you have to look at the culture of that particular family or patient that you're dealing with and know how to intertwine it. Who's dominant? Is the male or is it the female? How do families intertwine? How important is friends and outside associates? You have to look at that, because some family members, they won't even make a medical decision without certain members of their family being present. So when you're caring for your patients, you got to know the culture. Here we talked about generic folk. Here we have this is a witch doctor, and that's a healer. They use different types of herbs and medicines. The Filipinos use what you call cupping, where they take cups, glass cups, they warm them up, and they actually suction them to their body, and it's supposed to draw sickness out. Then there are some cultures that feel, and I want to say it was the Muslims, who feel like being sick is good, because then that means you have a constant contact with God, and it's forcing you to pray. Now, who thinks that sickness is good? They do. So if you don't know that, they may reject some of the treatments that you want to give them, because they feel like this is God's way of making them come and have prayer time with Him. So just think about that when you're taking care of your patients. Again, this is more different types, more folklore. This is like they can take different things, different herbs, and mix them up into medications. That's acupuncture. Over here we have Chinese medicines. We have yoga, hypnosis, natural type of medicines. It depends on the culture, which one they use. So make sure, and in most places, like certain areas, you have a large abundance of certain cultures that come to you. Try to learn those cultures. Try to learn something about their language and their folklore. And how do you do that? For the most part, you can talk to your patients, or if you have friends of that culture, like I have Filipino friends, I have Indians that I work with, I actually ask questions about their culture. So if I come into contact with patients, then I learn it. When I worked at the Hamtramck jail, where all of our immigration patients were at one point, we had a lot of Mexicans. I actually talked to my patients, and I learned a few of their words. So if I needed to talk to them, I would know to say allergico, to ask them if they're allergic to medication. Or do you speak English? How much English you speak? Poquito, little, you know. So I learned just a few little words of Spanish. It's good to try to learn some languages. Spanish is one of the predominant languages that we should learn. Now we talked about the professional practices, the doctors, the nurses, the nurse practitioners, and how does that intertwine? You know, they have the professional training, the skill sets for knowing what medicine says, but sometimes what medicine says don't work as well as those folklore medicines. Sometimes they really do work, but sometimes you have to be careful about mixing those two, because some medications may not work well with other herbs. So it's good, and when you're doing your assessment, to find out if they're using anything like that, because it may interact with some of the medication that's going to be prescribed. And we're still talking about that. And as healthcare professionals, it's good, even for the institutions, to make sure that we're teaching our staff and teaching ourselves regularly about various cultures, and even learning about some of this folklore and the different things they do, so when we approach our patients, we'll know what we're talking about. 3 nodes of nursing healthcare action and decision making. And this was also on your Sunrise Enabler. Different sections on there represent this: culture care preservation and or maintenance, culture care accommodation and or negotiation, culture care restructuring and or repattering. Culture care preservation or maintenance. This is where you want to maintain what they're already doing. You may want to tweak it a little bit, but again, remember, any decisions that you make, if you don't incorporate the patient in the decision making, once they leave you, they're going to go back to their normal practices. You got to actually sit down and talk to them and explain to them why it's important to do the things that you want them to do. And if they're doing already the right things, just tell them, you know, increase the exercise, or add some different foods here, add more fruit. Like even with a diabetic, you want to look at that. Accommodation and negotiation. This is where you're either going to accommodate them or you're going to negotiate with them. And like I just said, mention the diabetic. The yin and the yang. Yin is cold, yang is hot. You can look at that cold and hot and try to incorporate that when you're doing meal planning with them. Repattern and restructuring. And you see it's training, training, training. All these different cultures and different people trying to figure this out. But the way you do that is you got to educate yourself. Repattern is really more for us than it is for the patient, because the patient already knows what their culture teaches them. It's for us to learn the things that we need to change, how we need to restructure our institutions, our nursing departments, our medical departments, to be conducive to our patients. I left St. John's Hospital the other day. It's a Catholic hospital. Well, in that Catholic hospital, every night at visiting, when the visiting hours end at 8 o'clock, because it's a Catholic hospital, the Catholic chaplain comes on the PA and she does a prayer. What about your Muslim patients? It's a Christian hospital, but you do have Muslim patients there. You do have Jewish patients there. So we have to take that all into consideration. And repatterning is a phase that we can do that and incorporate that into our institutions and our practices. Cultural competence, phase 1, know yourself. Assess your own values and beliefs, ethnocentric tendencies, and cultural stereotypes. Phase 2, read. Study hard, it says over there. Articles, books, DVDs. Come to training sessions like this, workshops, computer games. There are even ways you can learn different languages and about different cultures on the internet. Research that. Phase 3, the assessments. Some of those tools that I provided you. Many tools, instruments, and enablers are available. I've given you several. Use those. Look for others that may be more conducive to what you're trying to do. Steps to culturally competent and congruent care. Holding knowledge. Meaning, in order for you to keep that knowledge, you got to keep studying and reviewing it until it becomes a way of life for you. Have a theoretical guide, which you all have that. Respect and genuine interest. Be genuine about what you do. Active co-participation of the client in the assessment to get credible and accurate data. You want to get the accurate data so that you can do the accurate assessment and provide accurate steps to getting that patient to where you're trying to get them. And sometimes it's not well-being. Sometimes we're going to walk patients through the dying process, but we still need to incorporate their culture into that. Here I compared two cultures. In the Filipino and the African American, we have the family is big. It's a big deal for both. Children take care of the elderly in both. Both are very religious. The Filipinos, when it comes to time, they're not time conscious at all. They have a time that they call Filipino time. They're going to always be late. So if you're doing anything with Filipinos, just expect them to be late. Because very lax with time. Won't give an actual time for anything, and they're always going to be late. Even the person I did my interview on for this class, the time that he gave me, it kept getting adjusted over and over. But African Americans are very time conscious, and most of them, not all, because remember, everybody you got to do individually are rigid with their time. I'm not that person, but there are a lot of people that are. Respectful elders, talking back, disrespectful. And we're taught to express ourselves. So that's the difference in two cultures. And if you look at other cultures, there are many variables. Globalization. This thing is bigger than us. You know, everything is going global. And even transcultural nursing has spread across to Canada, Australia, and other countries. That is the completion of my presentation. On this page you'll see references, and here's another page of references. These are references that I used for my research for this presentation, in addition to some of the information from my class, Transcultural Nursing 8-10. I just want to thank you all for coming out today. Are there any questions?
No. Excellent presentation. I have no questions. Everything was explained thoroughly. I feel as if I can use this in my everyday life.
Yes, very well said. Very well said. I learned a lot through this presentation.
All right. Thank you, ladies, for coming. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.